kgateway 2.1 just dropped, so I want to go over a couple of key features that are in this release. The first one is going to be global policy attachment. The second, we're going to dive into some of the new monitoring and observability features. And the third is HPA, or horizontal autoscaling. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing that I want to do just to be able to test out, especially the monitoring and then the global policy attachment, is get an application out. So I have this emoji Voto application. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get this out. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll give those pods a couple of minutes to just get up and running here. So far we got 1, 2, and 4. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna set up a gateway. Notice here how I'm using the kgateway class. So do kubectl, get gateway class, name. So we'll do kubectl get gateway class. All right, and we can see kgateway there and agent gateway. The listeners are just going to be over port 80. I'm going to be going specifically over the web service, and then I have the HTTP route here to just, hit the root of the application. All right, now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the load balancer's IP address. I'm running on gkey right now, so it's just going to give me, the ALB's public IP address. We'll give that a second to get up and running. All right, and there's that IP. So let me just go ahead and curl it really quick, and we'll just make sure that we can hit the application. All right, and here we go. Beautiful. Now, notice the headers here. All right, just keep these in mind, especially when we do the global policy attachment stuff. Right, so the application is deployed. Now, let's go ahead and configure the HTTP route. Same exact HTTP route we had before, right here, except notice I have this labels global policy testing, okay? It's really the only thing that's changing. So let me go ahead and reapply the HTTP route, and then I'll tell you why we had to set this label here, okay? Now, when I go into my traffic policy, a typical traffic policy is set up and assigned via an HTTP route and then a namespace, right? In this one, for example, let's say, there are teams that want to use this global traffic policy, but they don't want it tied to a particular namespace. Well, what you can do is you can set up a traffic policy just like this. And then instead of doing target refs, you do target selectors. You still specify the HTTP route object, but notice here, I'm matching labels for global policy testing. Okay. So if any routes have that label, this global policy gets attached to it. So let me go ahead and copy this. I'm going to create this. Notice the response. I'm just putting a couple of headers in here. That way we can make sure it's working as expected. I'm going to apply that. All right, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to curl again. All right, and then we can now see those headers. Okay. So that's global policy attachment. Now let's go ahead and jump into HPA. So to make sure that we can use HPA properly, we're going to have the metrics server installed on Kubernetes. So if you don't already have that, you can do so with these instructions here. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a horizontal pod autoscaler just like you would with any other pod, except notice here, we're actually targeting the gateway. All right, so now what we can do is we can do horizontal pod auto scaling via a gateway. So if I run kubectl get gateway, namespace emoji Voto, we can see that gateway here. And then if I run kubectl get deployment, namespace emoji Voto, we can see our deployment gateway here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some horizontal pod auto scaling based on memory, just as an example. Copy this, paste that. All right, and that's created. So now what I can do is if I run kubectl get HPA, namespace emoji Voto, right? We can see here's the deployment and then min max. So we know that our HPA is fully set up. And last but certainly not least, we're going to dive into some of the monitoring and observability features. And what we're going to do is we're going to import this kgateway Grafana dashboard. That way we can see all the metrics, and then we'll do some testing and stuff to reproduce some data. All right, so let me scroll all the way back up here. These are some large configurations, so apologies. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna install Loki and Tempo, and that's for both tracing and logging, and we're gonna use Helm to do that. All right, now the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna set up these OTel collectors. So if you're not familiar with OTel, like the way that I like to think about it is it's almost like a bucket with metrics, traces, and logs. So for example, like let's say, you have a couple of different monitoring and observability tools, or you're using one and you might move to the other. Well, I can actually set up a collector and then Prometheus can go and get metrics from there. Or let's say I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to go to Datadog or wherever, it doesn't matter. I can say, okay, now you point to OTel and collect those metrics, right? So it's one central place to do all your metrics, logging, and tracing without you having to set particular standards for all these different monitoring and observability tools, right? So I'm going to deploy the collectors here. This one is for metrics specifically. And then once that's done, I'm going to do the logging one. The logging one's much shorter. And then I'm going to do the traces. All right, now really quick, notice here are my endpoints. This is because, and I'll show you the resources, but everything's in the telemetry namespace. All right, so if I run kubectl get ns, we can see the telemetry namespace here. And then if I run kubectl get pods, namespace telemetry, we can see these collectors are now here and running as pods. Right. So now I'm going to install kubeprometheus. That way I can have a little bit of metrics and I can have a nice dashboard. Now notice here how I'm specifying Tempo and Loki as a place to get some logs and traces from. All right, that's going to go ahead. That's going to install. Okay, so kubeprometheus is installed. It's in the telemetry namespace actually. So if I run kubectl get pods namespace telemetry, we're going to see all the kubeprometheus stuff in here. All right. So now the next thing that we have to do is we have to deploy listeners to store the logs and then reference grants so that the HTTP listener policy can apply to the OTel collector services. So we'll have to do that for both. All right. So that's the first one for logs. And then we will do the next one for traces. All right, perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a port forward to Grafana. All right. And I'm not going to, actually, let me open that up in another terminal here, just in case any environment variables. So I'm not going to go to the dashboard just yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually produce some observability data here. So I'm going to do a curl. This is actually the wrong curl. So let me take that out and then we're going to go up and we're going to do the curl that we did earlier. Right here. All right, perfect. Okay, good. So getting some data in here. We'll do one more just for good measure. All right, so now let me go ahead and copy this and head over to a web browser. All right, so now within the web browser, I'm just going to log in. All right, I'm going to go to dashboards. I'm going to go to new. I'm going to go to import. Actually, no, sorry. You know what? I am going to, let's do it this way. All right. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go in here. Okay, now we're good. So I'm going to click load. All right, we can see kgateway operations, import. And we can now see our data here within the dashboard. All right, we can see our web service gateway that we set up. We can see our listener policies. We can see our traffic policies, our gateway, and our HTTP route. So those are just a couple of different new features within kgateway 2.1. Definitely read through the entire blog post. That way you can see all the features available.